Okay folks, welcome back to the channel. This time I've got another one of my videos about the books I've recently read. It's a bit belated because it's very gloomy weather where I live, and the room that I use to shoot the video is sort of low tech, I'm afraid. It's only got one window in the corner, and it's been too dark to shoot it, to be quite honest. But anyway, we got there eventually. Right, today I've got a couple of books I read not so recently now, actually. I've got More Than Human by Theodore, Sturgeon, as you can see. And then one that needs very little introduction, I, Robot, Isaac Asimov. Okay, we'll start off with More Than Human. This was written in 1953 and it was nominated for a retro Hugo in 1954, which oddly was the only year that the Hugo wasn't awarded. So the only awards were for the retro ones. Now it was originally it was a novelette that appeared in one of the pulp magazines, I think, called Baby is Three. But for the book, it's bookended by two further stories, or two further parts. The first one called The Fabulous Idiot, and the last part called Morality. Now it's about 3 weeks since I finished this, so so some of my recollections might be a little bit sketchy, but I will do my best to bullet point it at least, even if I don't cover everything, because I found it to be a rather complex book. That's not to say it is, but I found it to be so. So I'll just, as I say, I'll just hit the main points of the plot. In the first part, we're introduced to Lone, the titular idiot. He's sort of like a not exactly a tramp, but he's let's put it this way, no fixed address, and he gets badly beaten by one of the other characters early on, and he goes to live in a cave which he jazzes up to make it habitable. And during that time, he comes across Janie, who is a telekinetic, and Bonnie and Beanie, who are young black twins who have the ability to teleport. Now, he had been fostered by Mr. and Mrs. Prod prior to this, who, as I say, fostered him for about 5 years. And then Mrs. Prod was pregnant, so he had to leave. And so he went to live in the cave and met these three. And he goes back to see them, and Mrs. Prod had died in childbirth, but the baby was a mongoloid. Now the father, Mr. Prod, he was a farmer, and he was in denial about his wife. He thinks she's gone away, and so he tries to keep his farm going as best he can, but his tractor keeps getting bogged down in the dirt. So with the help of Baby, who turns out to be a supercomputer who knows everything, he puts on he invents an anti-gravity device which he attaches to the tractor. But Mr. Prod decides he's had enough and he's going to go away. Okay, so that's more or less the first part. Now in the second part, we're introduced to another character called Jerry Thompson, who's sociopath, really. And he is trying to regain his memory through this psychiatrist. I mean, there's quite a lot of that in the second part. In actual fact, the story doesn't move on that greatly in the second part. Baby is 3. But to cut a long story short, anyway, Jerry is taken in by Lone, who dies in an accident. So Jerry becomes the father figure to the others. Now, the other 3 have formed what is known, it's a German word, a Gestalt mind, which means something that's more than the sum of its parts. So, like a jigsaw, jigsaw, you look at all the pieces, but when you put them together, you have a whole. And that's how the 4 of the others, they sort of become the Gestalt mind, or Homo Gestalt, as Sturgeon puts it. And in the third part, morality, so Jerry takes over, and the morality takes part a little time after the second part, and Janie meets up with another character called Hippocrates. Can't remember his second name, and he's trying to regain his memory because I think he's been attacked by Jerry at some point, and he's in prison. But anyway, they managed. Well, prior to that, I'm skipping a bit here. Hip is an engineer and he works for the Air Force, and they find that these dummy missiles they're using, they just, when they go over this field, they just conk out. Nothing happens. They go dud, and Hip tries to find out, and eventually discovers the anti-gravity machine that Lone had installed for Mr. Prod. Now, Jerry, via Baby, finds out about this, and Baby warns that any machine like this could have great social and economic impact. So Jerry decides to dress up as a soldier, go with Hip when he tries to recover this machine, and he unbuckles it and sends it off into the atmosphere, gone. And at that point, Jerry is he's the father figure to the Gestalt mind. Hip goes and confronts him, and this time he's ready for Jerry. And Hip briefly takes over the Gestalt and becomes its conscience. And eventually he gives it back to Jerry because they find that they are just part of a universal family of these Gestalt minds, and that's how it winds up, really. That's without giving you too many spoilers, I hope. Now, my impressions of the book, it's funny how books written about this time seem far superior to much of the stuff that was written back then. There's a lot of pulp, space opera stuff. But I mean, something like this, written in 1953, Brave New World, written about the same time, and Stars My Destination by Alfred Bester around about that time too. And then, of course, a few years before that, you had 1984 by George Orwell. So, I mean, there were some, some wonderful books being written in the early 50s, and I mean, this is very well written. As I say, it's rather complex. You really have to concentrate because I gave you the bullet points there. but there are other characters that come into it. So there's a lot of people involved, and you've really got to study it. The story itself was quite advanced for its time. The idea of the Gestalt mind, I don't know if it had been done before that. I wouldn't think so anyway. I'm not aware. It's one of those books that you wonder. I mean, I'm aware of this book. I just wonder why I hadn't read it before. But it's a tricky book if you're just coming into science fiction. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a tricky book to get into. But for all that, I really enjoyed it. And on my usual scale of 1 to 10, with 5 being average, I'd give it a solid 8. So that was good. Okay, now my history with Isaac Asimov isn't good. I've said a couple of times on the channel here that I've read some of his stuff and haven't enjoyed it and got some I really hated. But this is one of these books that sat mutely on my shelves, accusingly looking at me, and then I'm looking at it thinking, I've really, really got to read this because it's iconic. Isaac Asimov's robots are iconic. So I could have started with the first novel in the robot series, which was The Caves of Steel, but I decided to pick this one because it's the first one chronologically, and it introduces the 3 laws of robotics, which are, I've got a little marker in there, I can find them. Right, first law: a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Second law: a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And third law: a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So that's the famous 3 laws, which sadly I couldn't remember, so I had to read them out to you. Okay, this is a book of short stories, which are, some of them are interconnected, but some are not. But the ones that are not are framed by the reminiscences or remembrances of Dr. Susan Calvin, who is one of the main people she's more or less a robot psychologist, if you like, but she's one of the top people in the field. And because some of them interlink and because of the framework of the reminiscences, it does read like a novel. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it did read like a novel to me. Although, obviously you're aware that all the situations are different. And basically what you have here is the humans, how they react to the robots, and conversely how the robots react to the humans. You have robots who think they're better than their creators. You have other robots who go on a rampage, robots who invent things like spaceships that take humans into space. And as I said, for Asimov, I quite enjoyed it actually. I was on the front foot straight away because the first story involves a young girl. It's called Robbie. Well, of course, Robbie was the famous robot in Forbidden Planet in 1953, I think it was, came out. And there's a little girl called Gloria who's got this robot that is a nanny virtually, and she loves it, and she's never away from it. She's always around it. and the mother thinks that it's an unhealthy situation for the child because she doesn't have any friends. So she has a big row with her father who thinks that the robot should stay, but she gets away and eventually sends the robot away, gets rid of it. Now the little girl goes into a deep funk and won't talk to anybody, won't do anything. And eventually the only way they can see out of it is they say, right, we'll go to New York for a holiday, the big city, if you like. And Gloria thinks, might find out what's happened to Robbie in the big city. Anyway, they go to this science fair, and the father has arranged for Robbie to be there, hoping that the mother's heart will melt and she'll let Robbie come back to the family. But in actual fact, something else happens, which I'm not going to tell you because if you read that story, it'll spoil it completely. But something else happens anyway, which sort of like warmed my heart straight away. And so I enjoyed the book overall. It's a bit dry. The dialogue is a bit sort of, I mean, these were written in the 40s, and the dialogue's a bit 1930s in places, 1930s detective stuff, like Jumpin' Jupiter and all of this carry on. But yeah, I mean, I suppose being 40s, written in the 40s, you might expect that. So yeah, I mean, I've given you sort of like a breakdown of what the book's about and my impressions all in one, really. But on a scale of 1 to 10, with 5 being average as usual, I'd be tempted to give it an 8 actually. I was leaning towards 7, but I quite liked it, so I'll give it a 7 because I can't give it more than Human, which was much better, even though it was written only a few years later than some of these stories. So we'll stick with 7 on that one. So yeah, that was I've read another one since then, and I'm in the middle of reading yet another one. So, but I decided just to do the 2 today, and I'll do the other 2 as soon as I've read the second one. So yeah, that was an interesting couple. If you have any thoughts about those 2 books, if you read them, please let me know. I'll be glad to hear from you. Okay, so that's about all today, folks. I will be back very shortly with my SF paperback pickups for late July it'll be. Got a few interesting ones there. And then for the shmup fans, I've got another pickups, some very nice stuff. I know it doesn't cross over too well, the SF people and the shmups people, but that'll be the next 2 I'll be doing anyway. So thank you for watching and subscribing. Please comment. I want more comments. Come on, guys. And I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye now.